The COVID-19 crisis is also raising new concerns about the treatment of detainees who are held by ICE. Detainees and staff members have tested positive, and the potential for a widespread outbreak has caused panic inside some of the facilities.
Members of Congress from South Florida are demanding ICE provide more information on what they're doing, and a federal judge is also asking questions. CBS 4's Jim DeFede joins us now. Jim, good to see you. And I understand a federal lawsuit was filed this week.
Yeah, they're pushing to have more people released from ICE custody, hoping that if you've got nonviolent offenders who are currently being detained by ICE, that if you can release them, again, not setting them completely free to where they may not still be deported ultimately, but if you can release them, this would be a good idea. Now, one of the things that is important about this is the Miami Herald, let me just give them credit, has done some amazing work on this and shining a light on this subject matter. Monique Madden of the Miami Herald has been the one who has forced pretty much ICE to acknowledge that they've had positive cases among staff and detainees. And is building on her reporting, I wanted to talk to somebody who was in a position who knew about exactly how these ICE facilities run. And so I got a chance earlier today to talk to John Sandwig. He was the former ICE director during the Obama administration. And he talks about some of the things that he's concerned about, not just about detainees, but about others. Let's play some of that sound.
I view this as an officer's safety first and foremost. Every single day, ICE agents and officers need to go into those detention facilities to do their job. It's not just them as well. There are other employees and contract employees. Now, when you have a pandemic or an outbreak in a facility, you're exposing those officers to the virus. Now they not only are running a risk to themselves, but also to bring it home to their families and into their communities. So look, the way in which ICE handles this gives me a lot of concern, beginning first with the safety of the officers. And when I worked at ICE, when I was at DHS, that was the most critical element of your job. Before everything else, you got to protect the workforce, protect the health and safety of your officer corps. And I'm deeply concerned that by refusing to take some common sense steps to shrink the population down, we've really created a situation where we risk exposure to a lot of employees. What doesn't make any sense to me is in an era when you have the Bureau of Prisons releasing criminals, when you have state and local jails releasing criminals, and they're doing it because they want to keep their workforce safe, they want to avoid a catastrophic outbreak in a facility. It makes no sense why ICE would not do the exact same thing, especially with a population that poses far fewer public safety risks than those that are in prisons and jails.
Why do you think there's a reluctance on the part of ICE to do that?
Well, look, in my experience, both when I was at the Department of Homeland Security and then when I was actually running ICE myself, is the agency does not want outbreaks of infectious diseases in their facilities. They understand the threat to the officers. They also understand that it's a real drain on the agency resources, and it's very difficult to deal with those or any sort of outbreak of infectious diseases. So look, I can only assume, and I'm not privy to knowing exactly, but I assume that this is the administration. The administration and their position on being tough on immigration doesn't want us be seen as softening that in any way. And what concerns me here now, though, is we're jeopardizing the safety and the welfare of ICE officers and agents who are putting their lives on the line every day, really to help keep us a little bit safer for the politics. That's what concerns me.
Jim, you also spoke to a father and daughter after the father spent more than 2 weeks recently in ICE custody.
Yeah, Paulino Gallegos and his daughter Anieli. This was a story where essentially he had been picked up. They came here from Mexico more than 20 years ago. She as a child. He works in the farm fields and nurseries around Homestead. He's lived here for more than 20 years. Has never been in trouble with the law. Pays his taxes. All those sorts of things. He got caught up in an ICE sweep on April 18th, or rather March 18th, and as a result has ended up in custody for more than 2 weeks, starting off at Chrome. And, I asked his daughter when I interviewed her today, just what that moment was like when you realized that her father, who was missing, was in ICE custody, and she had to make that call to ICE to try to see what was happening. Here's that sound.
It never went through my mind because obviously I never thought we were going to face that situation right now at that moment. So I hadn't called because obviously in my status, I was first of all scared because, I don't want them to kind of trace my phone and say, hey, all that stuff. So he did eventually call us, and I remember it was like around 11 in the morning that he told me that he was in Chrome. Right at that moment, I kind of like froze. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know. I didn't even, I started crying. I was out of it. Like, I didn't want it to realize that that was actually happening to us. So basically, yeah, until he called us at that morning is when I found out that, he was at Chrome.
Jim, the former ICE director said he thought politics might be at play here. Do you think that's the case?
It could be. You'd hate to think that that was what was driving part of this response during the pandemic. And, I know it's hard sometimes for people to say to themselves, why does this affect me? Why do I care, or should I care about people who entered this country illegally or remained in this country illegally and are in ICE custody? Well, here's the issue. If there is a huge outbreak within these detention centers, where do you think they're going to end up? They're going to end up in our hospitals. That's going to take resources, first responders, away from treating for the rest of the community. Also, again, to the point that the former ICE director was making, it's a matter of officer safety. We're aware of currently more than 60 officers who are in quarantine right now because of fears that they've been exposed to it. So that's, again, where if there is a COVID outbreak inside Chrome or the Broward Transition Center, they can be bringing it, the staff could be bringing it back into the community or vice versa. So this is a very sensitive issue, and I realize most people may not have a lot of sympathy for these folks, but it is important that we think about it just in terms of human terms, but also the impact that it could have on our own community.
Yeah, and a lot of people do sympathize and can relate to those folks who are here. They're immigrants. This is a community of immigrants, so we feel for them. Powerful stories that they have. Jim, thank you very much for that.